तव कथामृतं तप्तजीवनं कविभिरीडितं कल्मषापहं श्रवणमङ्गलं श्रीमदाततं भुवि गृह्णन्ति ये भुरिदा जनाः. So we were discussing a topic where the different forms of Kali and Shama is being explained by Sri Ramakrishna. And the Master Mashay, has given a heading that the infinite is incomprehensible, but still we have to have an explanation of the different forms of Kali and Shama. Shama is actually Kali. Shama means the one who is dark. In Vedanta philosophy, the gospel reads, he has recorded like that. Sri Ramakrishna is continuing his talk. We just saw last time he was talking that God reveals himself in the form of a devotee and the most gracious, loving Lord of the devotee, that he is. The Purana also says that God assumed form of Rama for the sake of his heroic Hanuman. So the formless God assumes, as it were, a form, and that form serves the purpose of taking the sadhaka from the personal aspect of God to the impersonal. Ultimately, he reaches the impersonal. That is what Sri Ramakrishna is pointing out. He says, in Vedanta philosophy, there are no forms. It's only the ultimate principle, that is Brahman, is the only reality in Vedanta. And the phenomenal universe made of names and forms, Nama and Rupa, is illusory. So Swami Vivekananda in his Jnana Yoga says the talk which he gave in London, absolute and manifestation, because this was one of the fundamental questions asked by everybody who does not accept the philosophy of Advaita Vedanta or Vedanta. They say, how can the infinite, the formless, take forms? Because in the material universe, we see one thing getting converted to another. It's just a transformation. The material universe, if you see, and the universe of energy and matter, matter gets converted into energy, energy gets converted into matter. That is the only reality we know. We take this world to be real. And from the real world, of course, the materialists cannot explain how something can come out of nothing. Did this universe exist eternally? Or is it just changing forms? So these are all different questions which naturally people who believe that they are rationalists, they will ask. So the question asked in question which was addressed by Swami Vivekananda in his talk on absolute and manifestation, a part of Jnana Yoga. He says, Swami Vivekananda says that the question may be asked that how can this absolute become the manifestation? So the only answer that can be given, he drew a diagram. In fact, Jnana Yoga, there is a diagram. On one side is the absolute, then time, space, and causation, which is Maya. Through the prism of Maya, the absolute takes human form and becomes this whole universe. And the universe with the cosmic mind. The difference between Jiva and Ishvara is that the Ishvara is having a mind which is beyond the, it is not bound by Maya. It controls Maya, as it were. Whereas the Jivas, the individual souls, they are bound by the rules or of nature, which is also known as Prakriti or Maya. So that is the only difference. So the phenomenal universe which we see, the name and form, the Spotavadins or the grammarians say that in the beginning was the word was Om, And from Om, the whole entire Nama and the different alphabets, the different forms, the different words. So each Nama is corresponds to another Rupa. So, but both Nama and Rupa, according to the ultimate standpoint of Vedanta, is illusory. It does not have any permanent truth. Illusory in the sense it is there now, but as soon as the Rupa changes, the Nama also changes. What was solid a few minutes ago, when it is burnt, it becomes a gas or a fluid. We don't know what its state is. So it had a particular Nama and a particular Rupa. That Rupa keeps on changing. So the inquiry is made to know whether this entire phenomena of Nama and Rupa, does it have any permanent existence? And the answer is no. We cannot have Nama and Rupa, we cannot have consistency. The Nama and Rupa changes. So that is why we call it illusory. It is illusory in the sense that the moment it comes under the purview of space, time and causation, when the very fact that we are living in time, we say time is going on. What does it mean? There are two events. There is some change going on. We were 50 years old. After 1 year, we say we are 51. So there is a point. There are two events. One is the starting of the 50th year and the ending of the 50th year. Then we say we are 51. So under the effect of time, the events which are under the events, under the motion or space comes, because we have found that these two events need some space to act out, and when they act out in space, it becomes different events. The event 1 second ago is not the event of once which is 1 second afterwards. So the phenomenal universe, according to the Vedanta philosophy, keeps on changing. The Buddhists also accept that there is no reality. They, in fact, they don't want to accept a single reality. They say the Buddhist philosophers that you don't have to talk of the infinite, because there is, they rather call it shunya. They said nothing exists. In fact, it is only the changing. What is now, it will not exist after a few seconds. So it's a constant flow which is going on and which has no reality, which is also illusory. So they also accept the idea that everything is illusory, but they don't accept the God who can be said, termed as Sat Chetanand, eternal existence, eternal consciousness and eternal joy. Buddha, of course, did not say that everything is shunya, but he did not want to discuss. He says the person who reaches the state of Buddha, he has all the miseries which are the result of time, space and causation. Because we believe in the law of, because we are subject to the law of karma. So karma is causation. The law of karma is causation. You did something and you get a result. So, and as long as you are under the domain of space, time and causation, Buddhism says, or even Vedanta says, then you will have to bear the grief or sorrow which comes out of illusory or temporary existence. So the names which are dear to us today, the forms and the names, the only the name remains, the forms vanishes when somebody dies. So that illusory nature is very much evident. It's a matter of fact. That's why Swami Vivekananda in his Gyan Yoga, on the 3 talks on Maya which he delivered in London, he says Maya is nothing but a statement of fact, a statement of contradictions. This life is full of contradictions. That which is temporary appears to us as permanent, and the mind gets cheated thinking that I am going to live eternally. As Yudhishthira said, I know every day I see people dying, yet I have a vain hope that I will live eternally. So this contradiction which we see in life, that man doesn't lose hope. Even though he gets blows after blows, he doesn't lose hope. So this contradictory existence, when one is tired of that, when one finds that it is all illusory, the moment you run after it, it vanishes. So that is the idea. So the devotee of God, as long as one cherishes the idea in within this Maya, if a devotee of God cherishes the idea that I am a devotee, I am a devotee, he has only one pursuit in life, that I am a devotee and I worship the eternal who has come in the form of my Ishta, the form of God that I like most, and to see him as a person. I'm not just satisfied with saying that God has taken some form. No, I want it to be a human form. That is why avatars have to come. So the cosmic Ishvara, the Ishvara or the cosmic who possesses the cosmic mind, can create another illusion or which vanishes when we get knowledge. We just saw Sri Ramakrishna mentioning in yesterday's class on the gospel that the formless God is like the ocean. And in some places, because of the devotion of the devotees, icebergs are formed, and the icebergs have form. They have a certain form. But the moment the sun rises, sun of Jnana rises, then that form vanishes and it melts into the sea. But there are some places where Sri Ramakrishna says where the ice does not melt, it always remains in the form of icebergs near the poles. Near the pole, you will find most of the time for millions of years the ice is there. So, from the standpoint of reasoning, we say that for a devotee, his form is eternal. The form of Rama, the form of Krishna, the form of any other Ishta is eternal. And whether you hold on to the eternal formless God or the eternal God with form, he doesn't change. He is not subject to the change of name and form because he is eternal and it is eternity as it were encompassed in the time, space, and causation. When it gets bound by the time, space, and causation, though strictly speaking, the Ishvara is never bound, but for the sake of devotee, Sri Ramakrishna says even God has to assume some kind of bondage. That is why there is a song that, I mean, I don't want to give mukti, but I don't want to give bhakti. I would rather give mukti because to if you otherwise God has to, if he gives bhakti, he has to be he has to accept a self-imposed bondage, and for the sake of the devotee, he has to accept a human form and come. So, from the standpoint of reasoning, the feeling that I am a devotee keeps him somewhat away from God. I mean, a Jnani doesn't want that. He said, what is the fun? I just don't want this form of God. So, from the standpoint of reasoning and Jnana, he doesn't want that feeling I am a devotee. Whereas the devotee is happy to see the vision of his God and be in his presence eternally. Then Sri Ramakrishna tells something very interesting. Why are the forms of Kali and Shama 3.5 cubits high? Because of distance. On account of distance, the sum seems small. If you go near, it will look beyond your imagination. What he means to say is that, and then why are Kali and Shama black? Because when the idea which is conveyed here is, when we see a form from a distance, it looks very small. So our conception of the Lord is very small. So we want a 3.5 cubits tall statue which we think, which we worship, because we are not spiritually evolved. Because of the distance, though we love the personal God, but the distance has made that infinite God small. So if you go near, I mean, if you evolve spiritually, what Sri Ramakrishna is saying, don't get stuck. Just go forward. Egiye jao. Just go forward. If you go forward, then the Lord becomes larger and larger. That is what happened when Sri Ramakrishna wanted a vision of Mother Kali. The first vision he got was when he tried to take a sword and kill himself. The first vision he in fact got was that of a pure conscious light of consciousness completely coming and engulfing him, and he lost consciousness and went into samadhi. So that was the first experience. So the more nearer he went to God, the Shama or Kali, which was Bhavatarini, which he was worshipping, which was 3.5 cubits tall, he was doing puja, he was considering that Divine Mother as living. He could even feel the breath. That God, when he got the real realization by the grace of Mother, it became an infinite light of consciousness engulfed him, and that form no longer was there. Of course, it came back whenever he wanted, he got that form. Then he says, Kali and why are Kali and Shama black? What is the reason why they are always painted black? Because of distance. Again, Thakur says that because we are uh, in the kindergarten of religion, we are very far away from the truths. We see God as black. He says again, water in a lake appears green, blue, or black from a distance. From a distance, if you see, but the nearer you go, and take the water in your palm, then the water has no color, in fact. So also, the sky from a distance appears blue. But if you go, the more nearer you go, if you go into the space, the sky loses its blue color. It is absolutely no color. So the sky, the space that we see around us, the infinity has actually no name and form. But because we are looking at it from a distance, I mean, we have yet to get the highest realization. Then we see that Mother is black. So that's why the statues are made black. That is what Sri Ramakrishna is explaining. We make the blackness of the statue shows that whatever you see from a distance appears dark. But the nearer you go, it becomes transparent, or there is no color at all. So I say, Sri Ramakrishna is saying now, so I say that according to the Vedanta philosophy, Brahman is without any nirguna or without attributes. What it is, its real nature cannot be expressed in words. But what its real nature of Brahman is cannot be expressed in words. As Sri Ramakrishna said, Brahma has not become Uchishta. We can't express through words. The moment we give Nama and Rupa, it does not remain Brahman. We use the word Brahman, but really speaking, we cannot use any word for that. It has to be experienced as pure consciousness, pure existence, which is the basis of all our relative existence. Whatever little changes that take place, the substratum of all the change is the changeless self, which is which does not change, which remains always existent. We don't remain always Sat. Our truth or our Sat is temporary. So our existence with Nama and Rupa, it keeps on changing. Whereas the one beyond Nama and Rupa, Sat, Chit and Ananda. Chit means eternal because we have that awareness. I see a chair, Swamiji says, I see a chair, I see a man, I see a tree. Whenever you see, actually you are seeing God. So somebody asked this question that God has become everything. That is the wrong interpretation people make. Trying to see God in everything and God becoming this is God, that is God, saying everything is God. That is, so Swamiji says, I did not say. I didn't say the chair is God or the table is God. He says, if you have to see a chair, you cannot but see him without seeing God. God is the eternal substratum on which this Nama and Rupa uh, plays its drama, the drama of Prakriti. It is being played. It is like a drama which we project on a screen. The projector is stationary, it doesn't move. But the pictures which are projected, the movie, that has motion, that has sound. So we can project anything on the screen. But the moment the projection stops, the screen, so also the screen takes its original form. The original form of Brahman is Sat, eternal existence, not the temporary existence of Prakriti, the eternal uh, consciousness, the consciousness through which we experience other things. I see the chair, I experience a chair in and through that experience, fundamental experience, which is the experience of God. So Sri Ramakrishna Swami Vivekananda said, see God, try to see God in everything, in and through everything. Every action that I do, every thought that I think can be thought through God, because that is the fact. We cannot exist independent of God. So that common factor or that common substratum of the changing nature or prakriti is God. So he says, as long as you as a person are real, the world is also real. Now, this is the question asked of dualists. If Advaita is true, asked by dualists, by Advaitavadins, they tell Advaitavadins, how can it be possible that the world is unreal? But the Advaitins say the world is unreal only when from the point of view of consciousness. If we lose our nama and rupa, if we transcend our nama and rupa, not lose, if we transcend our nama and rupa, and we are not under the purview of space, time and causation, then we become one with God. But as long as I as a person, I am real, then for me that Advaita is just a theory. The world is also real. So I am a Dvaitin. So when Hanuman very clearly said, when I think of myself as a body, the more gross I become. If I think myself as a body, then I am Hanuman, the servant of Rama. But when I think of myself as the subtle body, as the mind, then I am part of that universal mind of Rama. I am part of Rama. And when I consider myself as the pure spirit, beyond the gross and the subtle, when I don't consider myself as a person, I transcend that feeling that I am a person with Nama and Rupa, then I become one with the Lord. There is no difference between Rama and myself. Because as God we are one, but as human beings, then there is a difference, a dualism comes in. We are the human beings and we are the Jivas, and the Ishvara, who is the personal God, who represents the impersonal, and by worshipping him, we become one with the impersonal. Then Sri Ramakrishna says the names and forms of God are also real, and feeling him to be a person is real too. So when you consider yourself as the body, the most natural thing is to worship an avatara, to consider him as a person. Because we are considering ourselves as persons. We don't consider ourselves as mind. But when you study Vishishta Advaita, they say you are part of the Lord. How can you be part? Physically also we are part, but mentally also we are part of the cosmic mind. So, but the Dvaitins say that if the person is real, the world, since the world is real, the person also is real. But he is a person worshipping whom you can reach the impersonal. Though you want it or not, you can reach the infinite. Then Sri Ramakrishna says, yours is the path of love and devotion for God. It is a very good and easy path. Can the infinite be known? I mean, known by the mind? Besides, what is the need to know it? Having the rare privilege of being born as human beings, we should develop devotion to his lotus feet by any means possible. Since we have to accept, but we have a privilege that we are not born as animals. We are lucky that we are born as human beings. So we have to somehow try to manifest that eternal Satchidananda by devotion to the lotus feet of the human incarnations, and by any means, whether it is by thinking about him, by feeling his presence, singing his glories, anything. If you see, Mahapurush Maharaj also said, just keep your life God centered. Think about him, read about him, sing about him. Try to keep the Lord, the lotus feet of the Lord or the Lord himself at the center of our life as the main focus around which all our activities should revolve. If that happens, then you will find that that rare privilege of us getting a human body, it will be uh, it will uh, it will be meaningful. So Sri Ramakrishna says, don't bother to find out how big the ocean, how vast the ocean is. If you are thirsty, as Buddha said, you have sorrow, you get rid of sorrow. Don't bother about the existence of God and personal God, impersonal God. You know this is the way, worship that personal God, worship the Avtara, and get rid of sorrow. So he says, if I can quench my thirst with one glass of water, what need is there for me to measure the quantity of water in the lake? I am thirsty, let me satisfy my thirst but one by drinking one glass of water. I get intoxicated with half a bottle of wine. What is the need to know the quantity of wine in the wine shop? So trying to find out of curiosity and try to seek explanations is like trying to know the quantity of wine in a wine shop, when the best thing to do, if you want to drink, then you just drink. In the same way, what is the no need to know the infinite? So what Sri Ramakrishna here tries to point out, especially to the devotees, he says that even if you try, you can't know the infinite with this limited mind. So as long as you think of yourself as a body and a mind, then it is always better to consider the Lord himself as manifested as a human being, and holding on to him, you will reach the goal of life. Now we come to chapter 6. Yastu atmaratirev syad atmatriptasya cha manavah atmanyeva cha santushtah tasya karyam na vidyate. Now this verse is from third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Yastu atmaratireva, one who rejoices in the self. Atmarati. Atmarati means one who gets joy in Atma. Eva, one who rejoices only in the self. He has little joys around him, but he does not get carried away by that joy, nor does he get carried away by sorrow. So he knows the temporary joy and sorrow are going to come and go, but he wants to rejoice in his own self. So such a person is known as Atmarati. Atmaratihi eva. Yastu Atmaratihi eva syad. You become that for one who rejoices in the self, one's own self. He is satisfied with the self. He is happy to just exist. He doesn't want that he should be so such and such. He should have this name, this form, and all these things, they come under the relative world. But a really wise man tries to find. He does everything. That doesn't mean that one who is rejoicing in the self does not like anything else. He lives and enjoys the bliss of self while living in this body, like a Jivan Mukta. He Atmarati, he becomes a Atmarati. He is all. He doesn't require external support, external things, external name and form to uh, to make him happy. His happiness comes from the joy of the self, to be one with the self, one with the Supreme Self, or try to feel, imagine that Supreme Self has come in a human form. That gives the highest joy. So if he is satisfied with that and is centered in the self, he doesn't want to leave. He wants to do everything in and around Thakur, or in and around Sri Ramakrishna, or in and around Krishna or any other deity. For that person, there remains no duty to act. So here the question is asked, Tasya karyam na vidyate. Karya means that which ought to be done. So now we think we have imposed ourselves that we should have this, we should have that. It is, those duties are self-imposed, and that is why we want to manage all these things. We are managing so many things, so many duties we are performing, because we don't get joy in the self. If we are really getting joy in our own self, then like Ramana Maharshi just was happy doing nothing. He says the greatest thing is not to react. Now our reactive mind makes us jump about like the monkey, wanting this, wanting that. So the reactive mind is most active. Our buddhi has not awakened. So that part of the mind, when it is awakened, then he sees the light of the self and he enjoys, he rejoices the self. Yastu atmarati ihi eva. Such a person, Atma Triptascha Manava, who is satisfied with the self. Atma Triptaha means one who is satisfied with the Atmas, the Supreme Spirit. He doesn't give any importance to anything else. For that person, there remains no duty to act. So this is verse number 3, verse number 17 of the Bhagavad Gita. So signs of God realization, 7 planes and the knowledge of Brahman. Now Sri Ramakrishna will discuss the 7 planes as described in the Vedas. Sapta Bhumi, Vede Ache Sapta Bhumi, that is what in the Gospel says. So this idea of Sapta Bhumi, Sri Ramakrishna has heard from somewhere. Normally people don't, they talk of the 6 chakras, but Sapta Bhumi and the 6 chakras, they are different levels of consciousness of human personality. So let us see what Sri Ramakrishna says. Signs of God realization, 7 planes. What happens when a person gets God realization and when he gets the knowledge of Brahman? What are these 7 planes which the Vedas speak of? On which plane are we? And what are the planes we have to ascend to? We have to ascend to certain planes. So Sri Ramakrishna says the Vedas describe the different states of a knower of Brahman. All these things do not happen instantly. It takes a while, it takes a lot of time and many years to transcend these different planes. As you start from the lowest plane, the lowest chakra, you are attached to the world. You are very much attached to many things which make you worldly. The least rest of worldliness, if it is there, then you cannot attain. Sri Ramakrishna says this path, the path of knowledge, is a very difficult path. Though the Vedas talk about this, that through the knowledge of these paths you can transcend. But then for that, the minimum condition is that you should not have the least attachment to lust and greed. So people feel upset if they are told not to follow the path of Jnana. They want the path of Jnana, the path of Advaita Vedanta, because it is very nice, especially those who are intellectuals, academicians, and people who like to think. They get a great kind of wonderful kind of joy by following the path of Jnana, because Jnana you really can deceive yourself into doing nothing. Of course, Jnana can be very powerful if you, but then one has to remember that one cannot have God and Mammon at the same time. So Sri Ramakrishna says the least trace of worldliness, of lust or greed, if it is there, then the path of Jnana is not for you. You can follow the other paths, which is a more gradual way of approaching truth than the path of Jnana. So one cannot, this path is not for the Kali Yuga. In fact, Sri Ramakrishna says for the whole Kali Yuga, since we can't get rid of lust and greed, then it will be very difficult. Only a few lucky people can perhaps attain to Jnana. Regarding this, the Vedas talk of the 7 planes or the 7 states of mind. 7 planes, Sapta Bhumi. Bhumi means the level of the mind. So we are at a particular level on the ground level, then the first floor, second floor, third floor. You go to 7 different levels. They are not physical levels, but they are like the spinal cord. You see the different chakras, they come in ascending order. Then you go to the Sahasra. So 6 planes more or less correspond to the 6 chakras, the 7 planes. 7th plane is of course beyond Sahasrara. So Thakur now explains what are these 6, 7 planes where human personality begins his life journey. He begins from the first plane, and if he is lucky, he can go to the second, third, fourth. In his daily journey, he is going to the second plane at least. First 1, 2, 3 planes are very common. People just go up and down. Even animals may be going, if they were conscious or conscious of spiritual practices, they also would have felt that they are oscillating between the first 3 planes. So there's not much greatness in claiming that we are like animals, maybe some superior animals. It's such a derogatory word to be called as a social animal. You know, in the books on sociology, uh, they define human being as a social animal. What greater insult can you? We are not animals. We are not. We should not live on the lower three planes. Because if we live on the lower three planes, then we have to forget religion, we have to forget spirituality, and least of all, we have to absolutely have no connection with the jnana, path of jnana. So that is why he says Vedas, they talk of a knowledge where seven planes have to be understood. They are all states of the mind. When the mind is attached to the world, it dwells in the sex organ or the organ of evacuation or the navel. So it does not look upward in this state. So these three chakras or the three planes, starting from the lowest to the navel, that is the stomach, it does not look upward. The humankind, if he is stuck to these three levels, then there is very little he can achieve. It is only after he comes to the fourth plane, is the heart, the spiritual heart. At that time, uh, the Vedas also say we reach the fourth plane of the mind, and that is the heart. So fourth plane, you call it fourth plane or the fourth chakra. It is almost the same. So it is the heart. It is here that the mind gains initial spiritual awakening. So first three planes, if we are satisfied and live on the first three planes, then there is hardly any difference between animals and us. We are at the most, as I said, a little bit of sophisticated animals, that's all. But the three planes have to be transcended when one begins the spiritual journey, not when one, not the three levels you start. Three levels should have been transcended when the desire to practice spirituality comes. That means the lower three levels we have transcended. And as soon as you transcend, you get more and more joy seeing the divine light. One gets a kind of spiritual awareness that the world is not as bad, as sorrowful as we see it. There's something divine, there's something wonderful, joyful. So the fourth plane is the heart. It is from here that the mind gets initial spiritual awareness. One sees light all around. Seeing the divine light, one is amazed and exclaims, "What is this? What is this?" The mind does not go downward towards the world. So, a real sadhaka, when he meditates for long hours or for a long time, he has practiced meditation by meditating in the heart. Suddenly the light comes. He starts seeing the divine light, not the physical light, a clarity of understanding. That is what light means. Light means wherever the light falls, you have clear understanding. So, one sees light all around means one sees wisdom all around, the power of Brahman all around. Then, seeing the divine light, one is amazed and exclaims, "What is this? What is this?" The mind then does not go downward towards the world. The reason why we meditate on the heart center is, even if we don't go to the higher planes, at least we don't go below, we don't go to the reverse, the lower three planes. To prevent that, we have to hold on to the heart center. So if it goes up to other planes, it is fine. But when it comes down, it falls, suffers a fall, it should not go to the lower three planes. So the fifth plane of the mind is at the throat, the Agnya Chakra, they say. Uh, when the Agnya is here, of course. When the mind of a person rises through the throat, he is freed from all ignorance and illusion. He does not like to talk or hear about anything but God. Now, this is the characteristic. How do you know on which plane a person has ascended? If he gets the, he goes to the fifth plane of the mind, which is near the throat, his level changes, and if he just can't tolerate any worldly talk, because the moment you talk or expose yourself to the worldly things, then it takes you down the fourth plane, and then you might reach the first three planes which are common to animals. So, but to hold on to the person who always likes to speak about God, to listen about God, whenever he gets a time, he's hungry for, it's not the time which you spend in remembering God, but the quality of time that whatever spare time you get, you focus on that. So even though he may not like to hear anything but God, but there are situations where you have to think of other things. If someone thinks of other things, this person who wants to think only on God because his mind has risen to the fifth plane, he feels terrible allergy when such people come. So he just leaves the place because he doesn't want to spoil his mind by quarreling or telling him, then he will uh, try to object. So, but he just leaves the place. So, fight or flight. Sri Ramakrishna Swamiji used to say, the moment you come in touch with Maya, then there are several issues. So, if it those one of those issues tries to make you go towards the material, to go towards the lower three planes, then you have to assert yourself. At least get stuck at the plane, the fourth plane of the heart. So, when the mind raises, the mind is raised to the fifth plane, then you will find that person, find in that person a distinct change. He tries to talk only of God and the higher things. The moment any worldly things come or worldly matters come, he just discards it. He leaves the place, either flight, he runs away, or he fights and tries to remove that, the worldly things. The sixth plane of the mind is at the forehead, Agnya Chakra. When the mind reaches there, one sees a divine form all 24 hours of the day. So now this is what we were saying of a Jivan Mukta. Here his mind has to reach the sixth plane, when then the real sadhana begins, because one sees a divine form all 24 hours of the day. You don't feel that you have lost the presence of God, the presence of the Rishta on whom you are meditating. So through in the heart. So you have to go and realize him in and through uh, the in and through God. So if the mind comes, the level, the sub shashta, sixth bhumi is at the forehead. So he tries to see a divine form all the 24 hours. He never feels that he is away from God even for a single moment. However, a little bit of ego is still there. What is the type of ego? The pakami, that I am a devotee of God, I am close to God, I am the devotee of God. So all this I-ness exists even in the sixth plane. It is only when you ascend to the seventh plane you get nirvikalpa samadhi, or even you can say Jivan Mukti, because such a person feels that small I is also there. So that I can pop up its head, that ego, and that feeling that I am a devotee of God. For 24 hours of the day, he will be repeating the name, he'll be singing his kirtan, anything not to do, anything which has nothing to do with God, he will simply skip it. So he just feels intoxicated. He just can't leave the Supreme, the vision of that Supreme and the unique form. He just wants to be in the company of that Supreme. He tries to touch and embrace the form but cannot. It is like the lantern in a light in a lantern. One feels that one can touch the light, but because of the glass in between, one cannot touch it. At the top of the head is the seventh plane. When the mind rises to it, one goes into samadhi. And the follower of the path of knowledge has the direct vision of Brahman, if he is a true follower. But in this state, the body does not last for many days. Sri Ramakrishna is giving his own example that in his case he came back, but he says in other cases, after samadhi, the body does not last for many days. The person remains in a divine, he has transcended the body and the mind, and can eat nothing. And Sri Ramakrishna was in that state. So Hriday used to forcibly bring the mind to the level of the body, lower three, and just push some food inside. Otherwise, he thought his mama will die. So the body does not last. If one passes through the seventh plane, the mind passes through the seventh plane, which is a far off dream for most of us. It's very distant. But even if you reach, they say the body does not last for many days. The person remains unconscious and can eat nothing. If milk is poured into the mouth, it runs out. On this plane of consciousness, death comes in 21 days. So that is what has been observed, that this is some kind of, when you transcend the seventh plane, then you realize your oneness with God. You become one with the universe, and you become unconscious in the sense, not the unconsciousness of a human body which we find. You become unconscious or not aware of the world because it has suddenly vanished. And then whatever you do, Thakur would sit for months and months together doing nothing because he was in that state, that Nirvikalpa Samadhi, and only because he was an incarnation he could come down. Otherwise death will come in 21 days. Then we move on to Sri Ramakrishna says, this is the state of a Brahmagyani, one who has got Brahmagyan. Yours is the path of love and devotion to God. It is a very good and easy path. So he's telling Mani or telling Master Masha that you don't bother about the seventh plane and the state of a Brahmagyani. Yours is the path of love and devotion. Just follow it to the best of your capacity. Then the next topic is actions drop off after Samadhi. An earlier story of his life, how Thakur gave up karma such as offering drinking water to the deities. You should remember here that for a common man, to teach a common man, Sri Ramakrishna deliberately took the form of a ritualistic worshipper. He started with the basic minimum. So he wanted everybody who are on the three lower planes to at least make an attempt to come to the fourth plane. We think by taking initiation we can meditate easily and we can keep our mind on the fourth plane, but it is a very challenging task even for most of us. So one has to transcend. Then actions will automatically drop off. Even if you don't plan, somehow the actions become less and less. So there is a nice metaphor or a simile which Sri Ramakrishna gives. He says that if you have observed in those houses where a child is being born, as the child becomes bigger and bigger in the womb, the work of that housewife is reduced slowly by her in-laws. They say, now you are expecting the baby, don't. So Sri Ramakrishna used to say, but, and the work has been reduced in that case. The mother-in-law says, oh, until the baby is born, now you should not strain yourself, you do less work. So that is why Sri Ramakrishna used to say that how Thakur gave up karmas, but he had started with that. Then once a person asked me, Sri Ramakrishna is joking now, sir, can you teach me Samadhi? Everybody laughs because it is such a difficult state. You just can't go and say, ask, except for people who are born yogis, who are born, who are the direct disciples, they could get Samadhi by mere touch, but otherwise it is difficult. So say everybody laughs that such people also come who do nothing, have a live in the world and then just want to come and experience Samadhi. So that is the idea. That the wrong concept should be removed, that the Sapta Bhumi, though it represents the Tantric or the Kundalini or the rise of Kundalini through the seven chakras, the six chakras I mean. So uh, that sadhana is a very, very complicated and a very long sadhana. That's why everybody laughs when he says somebody comes and asks him directly for samadhi. He doesn't even know how to worship God, how to meditate, and he doesn't even know the constitution of our body, the subtle, the sthula, the sukshma, and the subtle, and the causal, and then how we have to transcend. So many facts are not known, but still people want the highest samadhi because they have heard this word and they feel that uh, they should uh, they feel that Sri Ramakrishna can teach them samadhi. Then Sri Ramakrishna says all actions drop off after samadhi. Actions like worship, japa, and all worldly activities drop off. So uh, in the beginning one is very active, but as the man advances towards God, the outer display of actions become less. so much so that even singing his names and glory ceases. So then he tells Shivnath, before you arrived at the meeting, people talked a great deal about your good name, qualities, and so on. But as soon as you arrived, all that stopped. Now everybody takes joy at the sight of you and says, here is Shivnath Babu. All other talk about you stops. Now here Sri Ramakrishna is saying, when we are away from God, there is a lot of talk. There's a lot of need for doing this, doing that. But as we come nearer to God, then we just fix our mind on the japa. That's why they say the Vedas merge into Gayatri, the Gayatri merges into Om. So the japa and the syllables give us the essence of what spiritual life is. We can transcend the gunas, we can go through all these planes if we just bother to constantly repeat the name of the Lord. So Sri Ramakrishna just then gives a few examples where he says, to teach the world, I started with rituals, but then as he grew up, his puja became simple and simple and simple, and then finally he gave up puja altogether. So the karma, if one is closer to God, then the God himself or herself, whichever deity we believe in, whichever God we believe in, the more we love God, the less time we will give to the world. So all that work is taken away. So also Sri Ramakrishna says, after the vision of God, I could not perform actions like tarpana and giving, because my constitution became something totally different. So karma was taken away from me. So only at that stage of life, when you have advanced sufficiently, then the karma will be lessened. That's why I told you yesterday, Yogananda, who was Arjuna in the previous birth, it is so logical that why did that active Arjuna? We are so bound and so fond of activity. We just want to do. We just don't want to be. So yesterday somebody was asking me, what is the best way? How did your institution last so long? How did the Ramakrishna movement become so successful? All other smaller organizations or smaller movements doing this, doing that. We feel we have to change the world. We have to do this. The culture is dying, and there are so many motives to start a small group, and that is fine. But the thing is that doesn't serve the purpose. Growth and change should be subjective, and it requires a lot of patience. So I had to tell that Ramakrishna Mission is not a, or it's an organization. It's the body of Sri Ramakrishna which is unfolding itself. It takes time. It is a slow process, and we just can't uh, give away work like that. That thinking that we have reached that. First, we have to do the work in a right spirit, and as you grow, as Sri Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, that you do karma yoga when your mind has become uh, why when somebody uh, reaches that state, then he doesn't have to do all the rituals. That is what Sri Ramakrishna wanted to tell us that till you feel, till you are in the kindergarten of religion, we have to start. And in his own life also he did. In the beginning, he followed all the rituals and whatever a priest does. But then he gave it up, giving this example. He says, I could transcend all this. And when the devotion increased, proportionately the work also reduced. So I'll finish now. We almost finished 1 hour. So if there are some questions, you can ask.